Thylacine. In 1936, the last known Tasmanian tiger died alone in a zoo, and the world declared the species extinct, except people in Tasmania never stopped seeing them. We're talking hundreds of reported sightings over the past 80-plus years, and some of them come from park rangers, wildlife experts, and people who know the bush inside and out. This wasn't some small house cat. The thylacine was a marsupial wolf with tiger stripes, a stiff tail, and a jaw that could open an incredible 80 degrees. It hunted at night, made this weird yipping sound, and basically looked like nature decided to mash a wolf, a tiger, and a kangaroo into one creature. Here's what makes this interesting. Tasmania is huge, mountainous, and covered in dense wilderness where you could hide entire populations of animals without anyone noticing. The terrain is brutal. There are areas where humans rarely go, and the forest is thick enough that something the size of a medium dog could absolutely stay hidden. Recent analysis of 2023 footage from the Tasmanian wilderness has researchers taking this seriously again. They're not saying it's confirmed, but they're not dismissing it either. The thylacine went extinct because European settlers put bounties on them, thinking they were killing sheep. By the time anyone realized how rare they'd become, it was too late. But extinction is surprisingly hard to prove. You can't just say, we haven't seen one in a while, so they're gone. You need to search every square mile of habitat, which in Tasmania's case is basically impossible. What's happening here is that the environment is so vast and the population would be so small that proving they don't exist is almost as hard as proving they do. The Tasmanian government has launched multiple expeditions, deployed camera traps, and analyzed alleged footage frame by frame. Some evidence is compelling enough that scientists who were skeptics are now saying, maybe. And honestly, if any extinct animal is still out there, this is the one. Ivory-Billed Woodpecker. This bird is the Elvis of ornithology, and people have staked their entire careers on whether it's actually dead or not. The Ivory-Billed Woodpecker was declared extinct in the 1940s, after the last confirmed sighting in Louisiana. It's a massive woodpecker, about 20 inches tall with a wingspan of 30 inches, and it's got this distinctive red crest and white stripes that make it impossible to confuse with anything else. Then in 2004, someone captured video footage in an Arkansas swamp that sent the birding world absolutely insane. The video is grainy and brief, but experts analyzed it for months. Some said it was definitely an ivory-billed, others said it was a pileated woodpecker, which looks similar. The debate got so heated that entire research teams split over it. The Nature Conservancy and Cornell Lab of Ornithology poured millions of dollars into searching the swamps. They deployed audio recorders trying to catch the bird's distinctive double knock sound, which is like two rapid drum beats that no other bird makes. They got some recordings that matched, but nothing conclusive. What makes this plausible is that these birds lived in massive old-growth swamps that are almost impossible to search thoroughly. We're talking about flooded forests with water moccasins, alligators, and terrain so hostile that humans avoid it. If a small population survived, they'd be in the most remote, inaccessible swamp areas where logging never reached. The ivory-billed needed huge territories, sometimes 6 square miles per pair, which means even a surviving population would be spread incredibly thin. The scientific community is still divided, but here's what matters. Legitimate researchers are still looking. When serious ornithologists dedicate their lives to finding a bird that's supposedly extinct, that tells you the possibility is real enough to chase. Megalodon. Look, this one is almost certainly extinct, but people desperately want it to still exist, and I get why. The Megalodon was a prehistoric shark that grew up to 60 feet long with teeth the size of your hand. It's been officially extinct for approximately 3.6 million years, which in geological terms is a pretty solid extinction timeline. But every few years, someone spots a massive shark, films something enormous on sonar, or finds a tooth that looks suspiciously fresh, and the internet loses its mind. The main argument people make is that the deep ocean is mostly unexplored, especially trenches like the Mariana, which goes down nearly 7 miles. If megalodons evolved to hunt in deep water, the theory goes, they could be hiding where we'd never see them. Here's why that doesn't work. Megalodons were apex predators that ate whales, large whales. To support even a small population of 60-foot sharks, you'd need a massive and consistent food source in the deep ocean. But most deep-sea life is small and scarce because there's no sunlight, which means no photosynthesis, which means limited food chains. Plus, we've tagged and tracked thousands of whales. If megalodons were still hunting them, we'd see bite marks, we'd find bodies with massive tooth wounds, and we'd have concrete evidence. Sharks also shed teeth constantly. If megalodons still existed, we'd be finding fresh teeth regularly, not fossils millions of years old. The ocean is big, but it's not so big that a population of 60-foot predators could stay completely hidden while hunting animals we monitor constantly. That said, the ocean has surprised us before. Every year we discover new species in the deep, and there are regions we've barely explored. The Megalodon probably isn't one of them, but the idea captures people's imagination because the ocean is the last place on Earth where something that massive could theoretically hide. And honestly, that's kind of beautiful, even if it's not realistic. Woolly mammoth. The woolly mammoth went extinct around 4,000 years ago, which sounds like ancient history until you realize that's after the pyramids were built. Small populations survived on remote Arctic islands way longer than anyone expected, and here's what's wild. We keep finding them. Perfectly preserved woolly mammoths frozen in Siberian permafrost with intact DNA, hair, and sometimes even stomach contents showing what they ate for their last meal. These aren't fossils. These are actual bodies that you could theoretically extract genetic material from. And scientists are actively trying to do exactly that. There are de-extinction projects happening right now using CRISPR gene editing to modify Asian elephant DNA, inserting woolly mammoth genes for cold resistance, fur, and fat storage. The goal is to create a hybrid that's functionally a mammoth and release them into the Arctic to restore ice age ecosystems. This isn't science fiction, this is happening in labs today. But here's the question nobody can definitively answer. Could tiny populations still exist in the most remote parts of Siberia? The region is unbelievably vast, and there are areas where humans never go. Indigenous groups in Siberia have stories about large hairy creatures in the forests, though these could be misidentified bears or cultural legends. The thing is, proving extinction in an environment that hostile is almost impossible. You'd need to search millions of square miles of frozen wilderness where visibility is terrible and temperatures kill. Climate change is revealing more mammoth specimens as permafrost melts, and every new discovery teaches us something about how they lived and how they died. Whether any survived into the modern era is unlikely, but the fact that we're finding such well-preserved remains means the conditions for long-term survival definitely existed. And if scientists succeed in bringing them back through genetic engineering, the question becomes less, are they still alive, and more, when will they be alive again? By the way, if you're finding these extinction mysteries as fascinating as I do, I post videos like this regularly. Definitely subscribe if you want more content exploring the weird intersection of extinction, cryptozoology, and wildlife biology. Thanks. Baiji Dolphin. The Baiji, a Chinese river dolphin, was one of the only freshwater dolphin species in the world, living in the heavily polluted and trafficked Yangtze River. In 2006, researchers conducted a 6-week survey of the river and found no Baiji. The following year, the species was formally declared functionally extinct. The extinction wasn't surprising, it was tragic, but it made sense given the conditions. Then, people kept seeing them. In 2016, amateur footage surfaced showing something that looked like a Baiji surfacing in the Yangtze. In 2018, the China Biodiversity Conservation Foundation released a photograph they claimed showed a living Baiji, and several researchers who specialized in the species said the image was consistent with the surviving specimen. None of the sightings have been confirmed by extensive scientific surveys. Here's what makes this interesting. Baiji relied heavily on echolocation, not vision. The Yangtze is murky, visibility is terrible, and these dolphins navigated using sound. Spotting them visually was always difficult even when the population was healthy. This means unconfirmed sightings don't necessarily mean the animals weren't there. Functionally extinct is a specific term. It means that even if individuals survive, the population is too small to recover or maintain genetic diversity. For the Baiji, that threshold was probably crossed decades ago. But functional extinction doesn't mean actual extinction. It means the species is doomed even if a few individuals linger. The problem with confirming Baiji sightings is that the Yangtze is massive, constantly busy with boat traffic, and murky enough that underwater visibility is severely limited. Traditional survey methods don't work well. The river is so noisy with boat engines and construction that tracking these dolphins is nearly impossible. If the Baiji still exists, it's in unbelievably small numbers living in a river that's becoming more hostile every year. It's probably the most depressing entry on this list because even if they're still alive, the chances of recovery are basically zero. Zanzibar Leopard. In the mid-1990s, the Zanzibar leopard was declared extinct after decades of persecution by islanders who believed the leopards were kept by witches. This was a unique subspecies that lived only on Unguja, the main island of Zanzibar. The problem is that locals never stopped reporting sightings, and in 2018, someone captured video footage of a large spotted cat moving through the forest that wildlife officials described as promising. Zanzibar is a small island off the coast of Tanzania, only about 600 square miles. You'd think that on an island that size, confirming whether a species still exists would be straightforward. But the remaining forest is dense, the terrain is difficult, and leopards are naturally secretive. Even in areas where we know leopards live, camera traps sometimes go months without capturing images. These cats are masters of stealth, hunting at night and avoiding humans instinctively. The cultural history makes this complicated. During the 1960s and 70s, there was a campaign to eradicate leopards because of superstitions linking them to witchcraft. People hunted them aggressively, and the government offered bounties. By the time conservation efforts began, the damage was done. But extinction is a status that requires proof, and proving a negative, proving that something definitely doesn't exist anymore, is almost impossible on an island with thick jungle. The 2018 footage shows an animal that's clearly a large felid, and experts who analyzed it said the movement patterns, size, and markings are consistent with a leopard. It's not conclusive proof of a breeding population, but it's enough to suggest that at least some individuals might have survived. Wildlife organizations are now funding renewed search efforts with camera traps and DNA analysis of potential scat samples. If the Zanzibar leopard is still out there, even in tiny numbers, finding them before they disappear for real would be a massive conservation priority. Japanese river otter. The Japanese river otter was last officially seen in 1979 in the southern part of Kochi Prefecture, and after decades of no confirmed sightings, it was officially declared extinct in 2012. There have been occasional reports of sightings since then, but none have been confirmed by wildlife officials. River otters are surprisingly hard to track even when they're not extinct. They're semi-aquatic, they move between waterways, and they're most active at dawn and dusk when visibility is poor. The Japanese river otter lived in rivers and coastal areas across Japan, but pollution, habitat destruction, and hunting decimated the population through the 20th century. By the 1970s, sightings had become so rare that researchers assumed the species was functionally gone. What's interesting is that neighboring regions still have populations of related otter species. Some experts think it's possible that otters from nearby areas could have migrated to Japan, or that a small relic population survived in remote river systems that were never thoroughly surveyed. Japan's rivers have improved significantly in terms of pollution since the 1980s. Habitat that was once too toxic to support wildlife has been recovering, and with that recovery comes the possibility that species we thought were gone might still be hanging on. The government has launched new surveys using environmental DNA testing, which detects genetic material in water samples. If Japanese river otters still exist, even in tiny numbers, this method could find them without ever seeing the animals directly. Fernandina giant tortoise. This one is different because it actually happened. The Fernandina giant tortoise was last seen in 1906 on Fernandina Island in the Galapagos. For 112 years, it was considered extinct. Then, in 2019, an expedition found a living female wandering around the island. She wasn't a skeleton. She wasn't a fossil. She was alive, old, and apparently the only survivor of her species anyone had seen in over a century. The discovery was massive because it proved that species we've written off as extinct can absolutely still exist, hiding in plain sight in environments we think we've thoroughly searched. Fernandina is a volcanic island with active lava flows, extreme terrain, and very limited accessibility. Searches had been conducted before, but the island is hostile enough that large sections remain unexplored. The tortoise they found, nicknamed Fernanda, is now in captivity while researchers frantically search for others. If there's one, the thinking goes, there might be more. These tortoises can live over 100 years, they move slowly, and they're not particularly social, which means a small population could persist for decades without interacting enough to breed successfully. The problem is that if Fernanda is truly the last one, the species is functionally extinct even though she's technically alive. Expeditions are ongoing. They're using drones, thermal imaging, and ground teams to search the island's most remote areas. They found old tortoise scat that genetic testing could potentially link to other individuals, but so far Fernanda remains the only confirmed survivor. This discovery changed how conservationists think about extinction declarations. If a tortoise can hide for over a century on a relatively small island that scientists have visited repeatedly, what else might still be out there? If these stories of animals coming back from extinction sparked your curiosity, consider subscribing. I cover conservation mysteries, wildlife biology, and the science behind species we thought were gone. Thanks for watching.